Good morning, everybody. My name is Roger Edwards and I'm the Marketing Director of Protection Review. And on behalf of everyone in the Protection Review team, I'd like to welcome you to ProtectX3. Whether you're watching this live today on the 4th of March at 9:30 a.m. or whether you're watching this later on a replay, I'd like to thank you so much for tuning in. The format of ProtectX is the same as always. 7 speeches, each lasting for 7 minutes. Hot topics, controversial topics, topics that we hope will stimulate debate. And after the 7 talks, we'll have a deeper discussion with our 2 panel guests and dig a little bit deeper into those issues which were raised by the 7 speakers. Now, we want ProtectX to be an interactive event, and this worked really well in the last 2 events in 2020. We've decided again to use Twitter as a chat platform. So as you're watching the speeches, as you're listening to the debate, we'd like you to get involved. Use the hashtag ProtectX2021. That's ProtectX2021. Now on Twitter, for every tweet you make, every reply you make, every retweet you make, include that hashtag. That means that people can see the tweets and they can get involved and they can reply and they can add to the debate. You can also search for that hashtag to make sure you're not missing out on any of the conversations. And we'd like you to ask us questions as well on Twitter using that hashtag. So let's make it really interactive. And you know what? Last year for both ProtectX events, we were trending on Twitter in the UK. So let's do that again today. Let's try to get ProtectX 2021 to the top of the trending charts for this morning. Shall we try that? Excellent. Just before we start, one more thing. Today is World Book Day, and I've recently published a book. It's called Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans. It's all about how to put together a simple marketing strategy and how to keep things simple as your business grows. Now, it's got loads of marketing stories inside, but also, even if you're not a marketer, there's lots of financial services stories in there, as you would expect, given my background. So if you'd like a chance to win a signed copy of Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans, all you need to do, again, is to go to Twitter, use that hashtag ProtectX2021, but include the phrase or something like, I'd like the book, or I want the book, or give me the book. So ProtectX2021. If you want a copy of Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans, use that hashtag in a tweet. I'll pick a winner at random, sign it and send it out to you. Okay, it's time for the first speaker of ProtectX3, and we need to talk about the future of financial services after Brexit. So please welcome to the ProtectX virtual stage. Well, actually, I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Iain Anderson, Chairman at Cicero AMO, and I'm really delighted to be with you at ProtectX3. This is a great idea. I think in the midst of all of this period over the past 12 months, just being able to stand back and think about some of the really big ticket issues that are in front of us, it is just a tremendous concept. So I'm going to talk about the political scene and particularly what's happening with Brexit and financial services and specifically the insurance sector. I mean, we never seem to stop talking about Brexit. In fact, if you look at my bookshelves, well, I couldn't resist writing a book about the very subject in the last 12 months. And, you know, we may have passed the end of the transition period. We've formally left the European Union. But there really is still a tremendous amount to do. You know, as I kind of keep saying to a lot of people, Brexit in a way is for life, not just for the past 3 or 4 years. So the most important thing is that within the trade and cooperation agreement with the European Union, there's no specific mention of financial services, other than to say that there is no deal for financial services. Now, that didn't surprise me. It didn't probably surprise many of you in this audience. I mean, right back to the summer of 2018, if we can go back that far, it feels like a very long time ago, Theresa May's government ruled out the idea of trying to lock in an agreement other than what was going to be termed a potential for an enhanced equivalence agreement. Now, I'll come back to that before we finish, but the deal that Boris Johnson ended up with, the trade and cooperation agreement that was pretty much pushed through just before the end of 2020, specifically rules out space for financial services. And now we're in this early period of trying to work out the new contours of the relationship with the EU, and we can kind of see on goods in terms of getting stuff through the ports, a whole variety of other issues. There's much left to do, and for financial services, there's much left to do too. So the government is looking, the UK government is looking to try and get an equivalence agreement with the EU. I wouldn't put an awful lot of stall on that. I wouldn't wait for that. I would continue with the plans that you've got, whatever they are, in order to be able to continue to trade with the EU. Because the early days since the deal was done, they've been pretty difficult, haven't they? You know, there's been a kind of vaccine war, lots of politics on that. The prospect of the Northern Ireland Protocol being triggered as part of this too. So the mood music between the UK and the EU is quite tense. I think that is going to calm down. I think not least actually because we're going to see a big offer from the UK government on vaccines kind of coming up. But I kind of just counsel everybody, don't rest on your laurels and don't expect to see a deal on equivalence. And that's why lots of people, lots of firms, lots of intermediaries kind of made their own plans, kind of regardless of Brexit. People opened operations in Dublin, they opened them in Brussels, in order to be able to continue to transact European business. And I think that's the essence of this. Regardless of the politics, think about partnerships. Think about the opportunities that partnerships deliver, either in terms of partners directly in the EU or actually some wider international partnerships as well. Now that takes me to trade. Having virtually signed hardly any trade deals with countries around the world, the UK is starting to pick up speed. I think over 50 deals have now been done. Some major economies as part of those 50 deals, but many more to do. So keep looking at the map in terms of the deals that the Department of International Trade want to sign and see what opportunities kind of come and flow from that too. The really big thing, and we've heard this from the UK regulators, is that they don't want to be rule takers. So therefore, again, I think the UK is probably going to be plotting very much its own course going forward. It's not going to rely on existing mechanisms. And therefore, watch out for what the Bank of England say, watch out for what the Treasury say, kind of coming up in the budget. I think from Rishi Sunak, we're going to get more of a clue as to the kind of Big Bang 2.0 that the politicians are talking about. And this is an opportunity for the insurance sector as well. Look, let's face it, this has not been an easy 12 months for insurance, with business interruption, with event cover. I mean, mainly on the general side, of course, but it's rather infected the politics around insurance. I would say lean in to the opportunity that a Big Bang 2.0 for the city and for the financial services sector might provide. Come up with the fresh ideas that government will want to listen to, because it really does want to get some new ideas from finance, from insurance, as to what to do next. So look, Brexit, it doesn't go away. I might even write another book about it, but keep an eye on what the regulators are saying. Keep an eye on what Treasury is saying. Don't bank on equivalence. Seek out some partnerships and think about the trading opportunities as well. If you do that, I think you'll remain pretty much ready for Brexit.
Thanks, Iain. It sounds like things have actually only just begun. Our next speaker is Head of Proposition at the Auxilium Partnership. So please welcome to the virtual stage, Sarah Moore.
We need to talk about talking. Now, when I was asked to do this video, I thought, yes, I've got a good idea about what I want to talk about. And as the days went by and I started to try and record, I found myself incredibly anxious about the recording. Now, anyone who knows me will know that I love a chat. And so what I wanted to talk about was how the protection conversations have been made easier and yet more difficult at the same time through COVID. And I wanted to talk about how we might take some of the learnings of the pandemic and lockdown into the world beyond the lockdown, hopefully very soon. But I was absolutely filled with anxiety and I didn't understand why. And it took quite a few conversations with my friends for me to finally understand that what I was suffering was just normal reaction to an environment that isn't normal. I mean, this isn't normal. Talking to someone, down a camera lens isn't normal. And yet it's become what's expected of us over the last 12 months. Teams, Zoom calls, Skyping clients, speaking to providers over webinars. And it's normal, it's usual now, but it's still artificial. It's still not a real environment. It's still not the environment that we as human beings are used to interacting in. So yes, I was feeling anxious. But it is a kind of an example of what the pandemic's done to us overall. We are living with an underlying level of anxiety. And what that's done from a professional perspective, from a business perspective, is mean that people are a lot more aware of protection insurance. They're a lot more aware and attuned to their own financial and economic stability. I mean, the protection gap is still as unimaginably huge as ever. Yet clients are more willing to talk about protection now. I mean, if you look at Guardian's research from the end of last year, what they found was that 75% of advisors said that they found an increased willingness in their clients to talk about protection. And something like 84% of advisors who admitted to not previously having spoken to their clients about protection said they now were doing it. So I think these things show that there has been an upside from a business perspective to this terrible situation that we found ourselves in. People are really now only thinking about their lives, about what their lives were before the pandemic and what they would like their lives to be after the pandemic. We are fully aware of our economic fragility as a nation and perhaps as a household. But as our personal hopes and desires, that going to the pub with your friends, seeing your family, eating out in a restaurant so you don't have to do the cooking yourself, as those hopes and dreams stay ever present and front of mind and our economic stability is called into question, those two things are literally all we can think about. And yet we're still not selling all that protection. We're still not having those conversations. Now, providers mostly stepped up to the plate when it came to the pandemic because they knew straight away that their own phone lines were going to be ringing off the hook with people wanting to know if they could claim, that advisors were going to be able to use the increased willingness from customers to buy protection and put applications through. We knew that GP surgeries were going to be a real challenge for people in terms of getting medical records. We knew that hospital tests for additional medical underwriting were going to come under scrutiny, they were going to be pressured. And so many providers really stepped up and found new ways of doing things. And actually, some of these new ways, they could be carried on after the pandemic, couldn't they? Could we be doing some more of these video interviewing rather than face-to-face? Could people be doing home blood tests instead? There are lots of things that we can look at and consider and take forward. But equally, some providers were absolutely woeful in their response to the pandemic. They switched off their phone lines. They had no contingency plan that meant that people couldn't go into an office. I mean, who did? I think it was just Wimbledon that took out insurance against a pandemic. So that left advisors in a challenging situation. They had an opportunity to sell more protection. They had people who wanted to have the conversation, but they couldn't actually get through to the providers in many cases. So there are things that we can take away from this as an industry that hopefully will help us going forwards. But in terms of talking, the pandemic is going to stay in our minds for a very, very long time. And for advisors going forwards, any type of advisor, mortgage and protection specialist, having the conversation, reminding people of what was most important to them during the pandemic, that has to be a great opportunity for us to continue to sell protection. To remind people that what protection is there to do is support people at the most challenging times in their lives. So this pandemic, if it's done nothing else, should have helped us to understand how to communicate better with people. Because our very natural interactions and our communications that happen every day have been taken away from us. And we've had to lead this very artificial life. We've had to learn how to communicate and interact with people all over again. And so what we should be doing as people in the protection industry, as advisors, as service providers, as insurance providers, is helping people remember what was most important to them throughout this pandemic. Living life how they want to live it. Being safe in their homes, being financially secure. These are all things that protection insurance can deliver for people. And as well as that, don't forget many protection policies come with emotional support as well. Third-party services that are absolutely crucial to people at the most difficult times in their lives. If we think about how we've all struggled, if I think personally about my own anxiety in creating this film, having somebody there that you can speak to who is qualified and can help you is paramount importance when sometimes it feels like there's no one left to turn to. So let's try and think about COVID as having created for the whole world an opportunity for us to talk about protection, for people to be a lot more free and open and honest about what's important to them in their lives, and for us to make sure that we are really explaining the benefits of protection to people, using COVID as an example. We need to talk about talking. We need to talk more. We need to get back to talking face to face.
Over the last 12 months, most of us have had to come to terms with working from home. So here to talk about the perils of home working is mental performance coach Carol Bagary.
We need to talk about working from home and the new world is taking us to. In the next 7 minutes, I'll be talking to you about 3 broad topics related to working from home. Number 1, the challenges that some of my clients are facing after many months of working from home. Number 2, some tips that leaders like yourselves can try out to help your colleagues and your organization. Number 3, the effect working from home has in the post-COVID world, and some thoughts that you may want to consider. First thing, the challenges. Unlike the first lockdown, the struggles people have are not generic anymore. They are more chronic and individualized. I have observed that for singles, especially those who live alone, the main challenge is loneliness. Huge lifestyle change, not being able to hang out outside. Without accountability, social support, and the energy that they used to get from being around other people, many of them suffer from lack of motivation, and yet they are overworking because they can't get away. The combination of loneliness, burnout, and lack of motivation can generate pretty dark thoughts. And for those with children, I've observed a lot of negative energy from overwhelm and fatigue. Parents in general have not had much downtime, feeling the need to be 100% available for the children as well as work. They're worried about not doing a good enough job supporting the kids and not knowing how to prioritize their time and energy. And for those who are caretakers, and many of them are also parents, incredible amount of emotional stress and anxiety, with unpredictable healthcare support for non-COVID health challenges, such as complicated pregnancies, rehab, other chronic health conditions. So, what are some things you can do to help your colleagues and your organization get through these tough times? The obvious ones are offering paid and unpaid leave, flexi work hours, home setup support. These are good, but really as leaders, the key is to know your people and their challenges, as well as the secondary and tertiary effects of these challenges. Outreach needs to be more targeted. Know that this will take more effort. It cannot be lip service. People need to know they are heard and supported. Leaders need to be able to empathize with their thoughts and feelings, and then consider the appropriate action steps to take. Consider skip-level outreach. Look out for red flags, like emails sent out at odd hours and people not taking any time off. More than ever before, respect people's free time and holidays. You will need to prioritize deliverables. If you're taking work off someone who's struggling, well done you. Do not dump it on someone else. Offer professional coaching because people are needing tailored help right now. So where is all this taking us in the near future? The challenges that I just talked about are mainly from two things: lack of freedom of movement and infrastructural constraints like school closures, access to healthcare, working conditions at home. These challenges will go away fairly soon, but I suspect the way people will interact and work is going to look quite different for some time. A new challenge, funny enough, is that people now have different expectations about working remotely. It's now been proven that it is possible to be productive with flexible work arrangements. People are going to want that. You can be sure your top talent are going to want that. Companies need to start thinking outside the box as to how to make it work, which allows for staff to work in serviced offices at home, from the parents' home, holiday homes, coffee shops, as well as main offices. The protection industry is a service industry. Your key differentiator is people. How good are your teams? Are they able to create innovative products that can serve customers beyond excellently? The dream teams of the future is diverse, innovative, and trusted. With all that in mind, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. Number 1, how do you create an environment that attracts talent to you? Number 2, how can you make it sustainable in offering your people the freedom they demand, yet balanced enough so that your front-to-end workflow is optimized? Question 3, what can you do as a leader to nurture, trust, empower, and show empathy in your organization? Imagine a working environment, a culture that's dynamic, flexible, forward-thinking, empowering, and most of all, empathetic. Do you think it can go some ways to solve your diversity conundrum? There's a demand for the financial services industry to change its working practices. Imagine nothing changes. How will you fare in the war for talent? And if you lose, how relevant will you be? It is not without other challenges. In a highly regulated industry, you may need to rethink your governance and controls to make sure all the checks and balances are in place. Think about data protection. But these things can all be managed. I believe the teams of the future will look very different to pre-2020. They will be diverse in gender, culture, and in age. They will be trusted to do excellent work. They will have open minds, and they're not afraid to challenge status quo. How can we stress test alternatives to some of the other things that we've said no to before? I hope this was interesting and useful for you. I look forward to a more dynamic and empathetic future.
Thank you so much for that, Carol. Lots to think about there. And what are your thoughts? Don't forget, tell us on Twitter. Ask questions on Twitter. Give us your thoughts on Twitter. Use the hashtag ProtectX2021. Our next speaker is the Commercial Director of Assured Futures. Please welcome Mr. Iain Sawyer.
We need to talk about dreams, because today's dreams are tomorrow's reality. And I'm not sure that we in protection are dreaming enough of how our industry could be. So I have a dream. In fact, I've got a few, and I thought I'd share 4 of them with you. Dream number 1 is access to insurance for all. Yes, I dream that every application we submit is acceptable. No postponements, no declines. Now this might sound folly, but let's examine why not. Why can't we learn from other products? Using qualifying periods and exclusions could be a way to achieve this. Why is it common practice for an advisor to say, well, you need £400,000 worth of cover, but you can only afford 50? Well, some cover is better than none. Why is this true for sums assured, but not for conditions? We take an entirely different approach. Why can't we give the client the choice to exclude a condition if they're struggling with an illness? Why can't we start cover with temporary exclusions of COVID, for example, if they have a persistent cough in the last 6 months, rather than decline or postpone all of them? Of course there are some challenges, and we must make damn sure that people understand what they are covered for and what they're not covered for. But wouldn't the reward be more people protected for many more occurrences? Dream number 2 is life insurance that actually is easy to buy. Now I recognise there have been some good steps forward here. Lemonade in the States, Dead Happy, Signpost have all made admirable attempts at improving this. But that's a lot easier when you have one set of rates, one underwriter to satisfy, and one set of questions, all aimed at clean lives. Not so easy when you want to match the right product to the client's needs and select the right underwriter and provide choice and value and advice. Yes, we need short question sets, instant cover, post-sale underwriting, eGPRs, and the use of technology to assess risks. I saw this incredible app not so long ago that could tell your height, your weight, your blood pressure, your heartbeat, simply by looking in a smartphone. Surely that is the good use of technology that we can use rather than endless question sets. Today, technology and endless question sets filter out the risks, drive down the costs. But perhaps the future is driving up the price so that the life insurance is easier to buy, as easy to buy as car and home insurance, so that more people buy it. But my dream is perhaps a reflection of the past. Some of us have been around long enough to remember the sweet and simple applications of commercial union, general accident, with short medical questions and a 95% acceptance rate. If we did it then, why not now? Royal London's Underwrite Later for business protection is a good step in the right direction. Wouldn't it be great if all insurers did this and put every risk on cover from day one at the quoted price and then do the underwriting? Perhaps using temporary moratoriums can make this work. Dream number 3, products and language that make sense to consumers. Another dream of mine is for the day that when protection products and language don't bamboozle the customers. Life insurance, life assurance, terminal illness, critical illness, serious illness, and the myriad of versions in between. Accident, sickness, income protection, health insurance, medical insurance. No wonder wealth managers and mortgage brokers don't want to get involved, let alone the consumers. And we've got to recognise that consumers cannot trust what they do not understand. Neither will they generally buy what they do not understand. Yet we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot by perpetuating this confusing array of product names. So I dream of consumers being presented with 3 products. Life insurance, covering the death risks. Health insurance, which is sick pay insurance with a dread disease rider. And medical insurance, private healthcare. We must keep it simpler. And while we're at it, why not get rid of these terms that we use, like guaranteed insurability options and underwriting, and simply call them what they are: increased limits, health assistance. Now my final dream is for more regulation. What? I hear you cry. Okay, the right regulation. I dream of a regulator who is interested in protection for it, firstly. A regulator who will police financial promotions and stop unregulated lead gen. It's crazy that such a high proportion of commission income ends up in the pockets of Google AdWords or unregulated lead gen firms, and who neither of them contribute to the FCA, the FOS, and the FSCS like we do. I dream about a regulator who makes it mandatory for wealth managers and mortgage brokers to have to write or refer protection. I dream about a regulator who takes seriously the difference between advice and non-advice, ensuring that non-advice is reserved for online self-service and single product providers. And those that do give advice are rewarded for that extra responsibility and protection they give their consumers. Why do non-advised sales attract the same commission levels as advised? I dream of a regulator that leads the UK life market to renewable commissions and wins us off this front-loaded indemnity system, which frankly is the cause of everything that's wrong in our market. You don't see a click life occur in general insurance. You don't see huge clawback liabilities being created in commercial insurance. Even though car and home insurance carries a higher average premium than life, the lead cost for car and home insurance averages around £10 a lead, but for life insurance, £50 a lead. How can our smaller premiums attract 5 times the acquisition cost? The difference is indemnity commission. It fuels too high a bid price, overspend in marketing, cold call selling, and lead gen, none of which occur in general commercial insurance markets. So I dream of quality businesses investing in their infrastructure and customer service, with consumers being properly serviced every year, and firms growing proper value in their business with sustainable, renewable income. So, do we dare to dream of what the future could look like? Come on, let's dream big and create the protection market of tomorrow.
Thank you so much for that, Iain. I love the 4 dreams format. And what are your dreams for the future of the protection market? Let us know in the chat on Twitter. Use the hashtag ProtectX2021. So please welcome our next speaker. She's the Managing Director of Umbrella Protect. Please welcome Anna Glod.
Good morning. My name is Anna and I'm here today because we need to talk about the protection gap. I will start by reminding some of you the latest AMI report, which was conducted and published in November 2020. The report has demonstrated some interesting findings. 97% of mortgage advisors say that they do have the protection conversation with their clients. However, only half of consumers, 53%, remember having the protection conversation. So I wonder why. And I guess that it could be possibly caused by the fact when and how they raised the subject. Because if they add a simple paragraph at the end of their suitability letter saying, "Dear Mr. Client, please consider taking life and critical illness to protect your debt," or maybe if they add one paragraph in their email to the customer with one simple quote attached, this is not how the job should be done. No wonder that people don't remember having that proper protection conversation. So I wanted to suggest today how it should be done. I believe that we should be selling home buyer's package. And what home buyer's package would be? In my opinion, we should be discussing at the very beginning, at the right start, arranging mortgage, protection with it, life cover, critical illness, income protection. We should be discussing what happens in case one of you dies, suffer from critical illness, or is unable to work due to illness or accident. And step 3, household insurance, building and content. This whole package should be discussed with every mortgage client. And if mortgage broker is too busy to discuss step 2 and 3, they should be referring that onto a protection specialist who will look after those needs. Why? We shouldn't be letting our clients go online and find protection solutions online. Why? Because in my opinion, they tend to go for the cheapest. And we all know that with buying insurance, going for the cheapest is not always the best option. If client would go online and source for critical illness cover online, they would probably go with the cheapest Aviva, for example. But we good protection advisors know that when the client is young and healthy and affordability is not an issue, it is much better to advise them going for something a little bit later down the line, like Aviva Upgraded or Zurich Upgraded, where they would be covered for all non-invasive cancers, and also it would provide them additional cover for their children. So I believe that not having those conversations and letting people go online is only increasing the risk to, again, consumers not being happy with the claim process. Also, another issue with going online, if people go online, they don't have this advisor who will help them with understanding how important duty to disclose is, duty of disclosure, to disclose all their past medical problems and medical conditions. Maybe they would forget to disclose something and they wouldn't admit that on the application, which might cause later on claim being declined. If affordability is an issue, discuss the affordability right at very start. What I believe mortgage advisors should be doing, if they agreed a budget for the client's mortgage, let's say £900, they should be sourcing mortgage deal, which will cost monthly payment would be about £800, and with this remaining £100, they should be leaving that for protection. So we should be actually agreeing budget for mortgage, protection, and household insurance, and this should be agreed as the affordable budget. Also, another great example when protection should be discussed, with every remortgage and rate switch. So if you are a mortgage advisor working with your client and you're doing a remortgage after 2 years, 3 years, 5 years fixed, you remortgage that deal, which means that you found them cheaper deal, so you save them, let's say, additional £50, £60 per month on their mortgage repayments. Use that for protection. Again, review their protection or refer it to a specialist, and we can, with this additional £50, £60, provide them with additional critical illness or income protection. So again, they are protected and we don't leave them vulnerable, which is especially important right now during the pandemic. When everyone hears and reads everywhere about illness and death, it's natural that people will wonder, what if something happens to me? And finally, how to convert more, how to convince more people. My advice is, stop talking about premiums and products and claim stats. Tell a story. Tell a successful client story. Share a successful claim. Tell how you help other clients. Because someone will believe in one story more than in all the provider stats or how you telling how great the product is, please remember, focus on that income protection conversation. When we look at the stats, the latest Aviva income protection stats show that most income protection claims were made for musculoskeletal and mental health problems. Cancer was number 3 on the list, which only shows us that people do claim for things like back problems, mental health, depression, anxiety, again, especially right now during the pandemic, and that wouldn't be covered by a standard critical illness policy. So you either write it or refer it, but definitely we need to have those protection conversations. Finally, I recommend to help with the claim process. It will cement the relationship between you and your client, and it will bring you good referrals to their friends and family, which is the best possible lead that you can get.
Our penultimate speaker is Simoney Kyriakou from FT Advisor. So please welcome to the virtual stage, Simoney.
We need to talk about vulnerability. The Financial Conduct Authority has just released its Financial Life Survey, which shows that 27.7 million UK adults are vulnerable. This is a 15% increase on February 2020, when the number stood at 24 million. Still way too high at 24 million. But this increase, the FCA said, has been largely attributed to COVID-19. The pandemic has exposed weaknesses in the collective health of the nation. Our mental health has been affected. Isolation, months of protracted lockdown have caused so many people to feel anxious, increased depression. People really, really want to start getting out and seeing their friends and family. And they haven't been able to, and it has caused significant distress. People are financially anxious. They may not have been made redundant, but the threat looms over them. Every week seems to bring bad news about another big name going under and thousands of redundancies being announced. Add to this the end of furlough schemes, and people perhaps are feeling far more financially fragile than they ever have. Some people have had to bring retirement forward. Some people have pushed it back. And then, of course, there's the overarching health concern. I don't want to catch COVID. Now, we know on this latter point, this has caused many people not to go to the doctors. People who perhaps had maybe little niggling health issues that they would have perhaps gone to see their GP about in a normal year, or in a pandemic year. Absolutely no way. Not going to the GP, not going to A&E. But we know that had they gone, these little niggling health concerns could have led to a diagnosis of something far more serious. And medical intervention could have happened sooner. But by delaying this, we know and we fear that serious illnesses, such as cancer, may not be discovered until it's almost too late. So one thing we can do relating to that particular point is help people who are feeling vulnerable and maybe don't want to go to A&E or to their GP. Remind them of the services and the support services attached to their insurance policies. Remind them that there are mental health counselling facilities available on nearly every single insurance policy. Talk to them about the nurses that they can pick up the phone to and speak to for free. Talk to them about the online GP services that are often attached to health policies. Let them get online consultations. This is a very practical way that we can help people whose health might be feeling very vulnerable, or might be feeling very vulnerable because of their health at the moment. But let's also look at financial health. The FCA was very clear in its survey that COVID-19 has had a deleterious effect on people's financial health. 1.4 million people told the FCA and Action Forward that they had been contacted or received a cold call or been led astray by a cold call, talking specifically about, well, you need to give me money so that I can give you a COVID-19 test. COVID-19, unfortunately, has given a much wider playing field for scammers to try and find a way in, find a hook to prey on people's vulnerability, to prey on their loneliness. I've spoken to financial advisors who said their elderly clients had given money away to scammers because they were lonely. The old person was saying, well, I haven't spoken to anyone for a few weeks and hadn't seen anyone. And he was such a polite young man. He was so nice on the phone. I wanted to help him. He seemed so genuine. And they've been scammed. Some people have been scammed out of hundreds of thousands of pounds. It's horrible. We need to do more to combat these rogues. At a time when the whole nation is feeling vulnerable, we need to do more. We need to step and to stand in that breach. When you see a scam advert online, as I have on my Facebook page, women in your area of your age can get life insurance for £10.50, we need to say no. Don't give your details to these people. These could be lead generation firms who might only be giving it to one particular person. It's all verified and it's all kosher. But actually, the majority of these cases, not only are the premiums not £10.50, but far, far higher, because obviously it depends on someone's personal circumstances. But also they could be giving it to 3 or 4 providers and 3 or 4 brokers. And no one's doing proper verification. People aren't always worried about where they're buying their leads from. No, you need to say, no, I will only buy leads from a verified and reputable source. I'm not going to put potential clients' data at risk. And if you see a scam ad where you know for a fact that these people are fraudsters, report it. Report it to the search engine, report it to the platform on which it's being held, report it to the FCA's ScamSmart. Put on your websites and in your client newsletters, these are scams. Be aware of them, watch out for them. We know for a fact that Google has said told me that it's closed down over 1 million fraudulent ads, but it's not enough. We need to do more to get into legislation to crack down on financial harm. Now, I know Steve Timms has told me he will seek to bring an amendment to the Department for Culture, Media and Sports Online Harms Bill. Now, back in December, they said it won't include financial harms. It's only going to include things like sex trafficking, child pornography, terrorism. But actually, if you lobby your MPs, lobby the Work and Pensions Committee, lobby the DCMS, it will bring in financial harms. We've got to get this enshrined in legislation. We've got to give enforcers more teeth, or sharpen their teeth, so they can crack down on these rogues. And the more we expose, the more we tell people about them, the more we make their activity harder for them to do, the more educated our clients and potential clients, the better protected these people are. Everyone is feeling vulnerable right now. Let's do what we can to help protect them at a time when they need us most.
Thank you for that thought-provoking speech, Simoney. And now it's time for our final speaker today at ProtectX. From London Money, please welcome to the virtual stage, Mr. Jiten Varsani.
Thank you, Roger, and good morning, everyone. We need to talk about modernising the protection conversations that we have with our clients. We've seen some great changes in our industry, including protection developments, claims payouts, simplified underwriting, and more recently, how we've adapted to the challenges of COVID-19. But over the last 40 or so years, we've seen very little, if any, change to the way we talk to our clients and the actual advice process regarding protection. As an advisor, I feel that mortgage protection is so dated, we would never think about insuring just half of our house or a quarter of our car. So why do we feel it's okay to protect just one aspect of our clients' needs? I assume protection insurance and mortgages became so interlinked from the days when life insurance was a prerequisite for the mortgage. But asking around now, that hasn't been the case for about 30 or so years. So why does that protection and mortgage conversation still go exclusively hand in hand? Research shows that only a small percentage of clients that make a claim on their mortgage protection actually pay the mortgage off. Why? Is it because the reality is when they make a claim, they've realised there's so many other areas that money can be used? Would it surprise you if I told you that just in the last 8 years, I've arranged one single mortgage protection policy for a client? Now, before anyone reports me to the FCA, let me explain. All other cover has been set up on a more holistic, lifestyle-based approach. Our client dynamics have greatly changed in the last 40 years, with more people renting or buying property later in life. This alone is a massive reason why we need to change and adapt the way we talk about protection. I previously tweeted about a young lady who was diagnosed with cancer. She was married with children, and when I asked her if she had any cover, she replied, "No, I don't have a mortgage." What do we as an industry say to that?
What I love about my career is the varied people we get to meet on a daily basis as our clients. Different people at different stages in their lives, all from different backgrounds, with varying goals and ambitions for the future. From a client who wants to sit at home and watch EastEnders all day long, to someone who wants to travel 6 times a year, and all others in between. Choosing one that represents one of my first ever clients, let's take a look at their timeline to change our approach from a short-term to long-term perspective of protection planning. Both age 30 at the time we met, they wish to retire at 65 and hope to live a long, healthy life into retirement. Though sadly from our industry experience, we know that will not always be the case. One common factor that all our clients share wherever they are on their timeline is that money comes in, and then no prizes for guessing the next part, money goes back out again. This is the basic and simple principles of any financial planning. All expenditure will fall into that money outgoing, even savings, which is just simply deferred future expenditure. But what happens to our clients, their hopes, their dreams and their goals if that money coming in stops or comes to a standstill? As an industry, we've always generally asked the question, "Dear sir, madam, if you die or you're diagnosed with a critical illness, would you want your mortgage paid off?" A very close question indeed. From talking to my clients, I know that they have so many more aspirations than just a mortgage, assuming that they even have or want a mortgage. Now, in fairness, that icon should probably be called home. When we change the conversation, a very simple tweak to ask, if you die or you're diagnosed with an illness, what do you want? This is what many clients will actually say. Now, of course, this will vary by individual, but it represents the fact there is so much more to our clients than just a mortgage. One of the biggest obstacles for our industry is overcoming superhero syndrome, the idea that it will never happen to me. For those that accept it could happen, I find it hard to believe that they would only ever just want to cover their mortgage if they had been given the right advice from the beginning.
Let's look at a household's income. If 25% of that income was spent on the mortgage, are we trying to say to that client that protecting the other 75% isn't important? What about a client who pays their mortgage off by age 55 but will still continue working to age 68? Are we telling that client that that proportion of money that once was spent on the mortgage is now no longer important, even if, say, they were going to use that to build up their retirement pot? Later on this afternoon, why don't you take a pen and paper and draw your own timeline with your own goals and ambitions and ask yourself, what would you want to protect if things were to go wrong? If today we were to redesign the advice process, would protection start and end with the mortgage cover? Or would we have a more holistic approach to ensure that we protect our clients for a much wider and broader sense? I'd like to share with you a conversation I had with a client who had a stroke in his 30s. Some of his worries actually included, will I recover from this? How will I get dressed in the morning? What will my future look like? What about my wife and kids? Will I be ever able to work again? How will I help my parents when they need my help? Now, these are real concerns at a troublesome time. Thankfully, he had all the right cover in place that he pre-arranged. And interestingly, when he took that cover, he didn't have a mortgage. But the reality, though, there is that the emotional burden will still be there. We can't remove that from our clients. But what we can do with the holistic approach is to take care of all the other costs, the bills, the expenses that don't stop, and ensure that the client can focus on their health and getting better. There has to be a time for change, and this has to be that time. Please let's focus on protecting the money that comes in and protecting that rather than just the outgoing mortgage. Let's modernise our conversation so that we're still compliant, but making sure we have the conversations that are fit for the 21st century. Remember, as professional advisors and not salespeople, we have a duty of care to our clients and their families, because if we don't have that conversation with them, who will? I need the help of everyone in the protection industry, including product designers, marketing departments, BDMs, journalists, and of course, advisors. Because only when we change our mindset can we pass that education on to our clients. We have a huge protection gap in the UK. Some of that obviously arises from those clients with no cover at all, and the rest possibly from those with insufficient or inadequate cover. In closing now, I appreciate that there is a huge difference between the cover that a client may need and that which they can afford. But if we start at the top and give them all the right information and the right education, let's allow the client to make the choices for them as to what they wish to protect. I really hope I've demonstrated the need to modernise the protection conversation. And please stay safe, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Jiten, for that really thought-provoking end to the 7 speeches that we've listened to today at ProtectX. Do you know, some of the material we've heard today has been absolutely fantastic. I've been writing down buzzwords and straplines and one sentences, and you know, we're going to go back over the tweet, we're going to go back over the scripts for today's speeches and find so many gems. One of the ones that really stood out for me today was forget the stats, tell a story. Isn't that just absolutely what we're about in the protection market? Now, before I introduce our panel guest today, I'd like to show our appreciation to the speakers from ProtectX3. And obviously, we're not in a live venue, we're not in a landmark, we're not in an auditorium. The only way that we can really do this is to do what we call a thunderclap on Twitter. So what I'd like you to do, I know you've all been out there using Twitter this morning. Thanks for that. Use the hashtag ProtectX2021. Type in a little sentence, something like thanks to the speakers, or I really enjoyed your talks today, something like that. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds, 20 seconds to write a tweet. Include the hashtag. And what we're going to do is I'm going to count you down from 3 to 1, and we're all going to hit the post button at the same time. And hopefully what will happen is there'll be an absolutely huge Twitter thunderclap at that moment. Everybody using the hashtag, a great way to show our appreciation to the speakers. So have you written something? Are you ready? So let's count down. 3, 2, 1, and tweet. There we go. Thank you so much for that. And again, thank you so much for our 7 speakers. We've got a lot to talk about in the next half an hour. So I'm delighted to introduce you to our 2 panel guests today. First of all, we have David Mead, who is the Managing Director of Futureproof, and Emma Thomson, who is the founder of Women in Protection. Welcome to ProtectX3.
Morning.
Good morning.
So by way of introduction, what I'm going to ask each of you to do, if that's okay, is quickly give me a little bit of background about yourself, where you came from, what you do. But also, as was said earlier, it's World Book Day today, hashtag World Book Day. I've already plugged my book. A few people also plugged their book in the videos. But if you introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of background about yourself, and also tell us what's either your favorite book or what is it that you're reading at the moment. So David, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, morning, first of all. Delighted to be here today, and just pass on my compliments to all the speakers before. Absolutely fantastic presentations. So my name's David Mead. I'm a founder and director of Futureproof, who are a protection specialist, for those of you who haven't heard of us before. I'm also joint head of protection at St James's Place Protection Planning. So St James's Place acquired Futureproof about 2 years ago to provide an internal protection referral service for their partners and advisors, and now we're fielding referrals from that team. And I'm also one of the founders, along with Emma, the Protection Distributors Group, and we work with insurers and intermediaries to try and improve consumer outcomes. So we've been responsible for various things like the claims charter, the funeral pledge, and improving general access to insurance.
And your book?
My book, well, a bit of a twist. I don't make enough time to read, but Keith Richards' autobiography here. Absolutely remarkable clarity considering the life he's lived, almost 20/20 vision. But one of the things that's incredible about him is, I suppose, put an insurance twist on it, is in his younger days, I imagine he would have definitely fallen into the declined application category. But now he's just turned 78. So I guess really what that proves is my friends in underwriters aren't always right.
So let's move on to Emma. And Emma, happy birthday for earlier in the week, by the way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm a leap year, so actually I didn't quite technically have a birthday, but it's fine. So I'm Emma Thomson. I've firmly got my Women in Protection Network hat on today because I'm actually in between jobs. So I'm starting a new job next month. My background in protection is over 20 years working on both the distribution and the insurer sides, over 18 years at LifeSearch and ProviderWise, Unum, and more recently British Friendly. I founded the Women in Protection Network really to provide a framework for women who work within our industry to network and get to know each other, and really just try and make sure that we are raising the profile of the need for our industry to be far more diverse and inclusive to better reflect the society that we serve. So that's kind of, so if you're interested in joining, then please do contact us. But I'm really delighted to be here today. And as David said, 7 brilliant topics for us to be chatting about. My favourite book, 2 things, I guess. One, I'm a bit of a cookbook fetish person. I've kind of got over 200. I've stopped counting now, so kind of put that to one side. But I also love my history. So my actual favorite book is a book by Len Dayton, which is out of print at the moment, but you can still buy secondhand ones, and it's called Vinter, and it's about a family from 1899 to 1945, and it starts off at the Nuremberg trials with 2 brothers, and one of them's on the side of the Americans and one of them's in a cell as a Nazi, and you've got to kind of work out which brother ends up on which side all the way through the book. It's absolutely blooming brilliant. So if you like that kind of thing, I can definitely recommend that. Len Dayton and Vinter.
Fantastic. Now, one of the things that really stood out for me today at ProtectX3, and to be perfectly honest, this wasn't planned, but there was a theme that was running through the majority of the presentations, and that was all about the language of protection, how we talk about protection. I mean, Sarah Moore's talk really resonated for me in the way she expressed what's been happening with COVID, but all of the talks referred to the language of protection to a certain extent. But what I don't want to do is immediately dive into that subject, because obviously people have heard quite a lot about it this morning so far. So what I am going to do, first of all, is ask David and Emma a question raised by Vicky Churcher from AIG. Vicky very kindly sent this question in just as we were preparing the session. And the question is, and maybe I'll start with David, what, if any, changes do you think customers would like to see to the sales process after we've got rid of the COVID pandemic? And how can providers like Futureproof, how can providers help distributors like Futureproof meet these changes? So David, what do you think?
Well, great question. And there's so much we've learned, isn't there? The last 12 months is we've been forced to learn, whether we wanted to or not, really, and adapt. But things going forwards, how customer engagement, I mean, we're a telephone-based intermediaries that, there's not uncommon in the industry, but we've really adapted, and we regularly use Zoom and Teams and platforms such as that to engage with clients now, particularly around business protection, where you've got multiple parties involved, and they can all get involved. They're sitting in different parts of the country, and they can all get involved, like today, in the same conversation. We find that a really useful tool. I think a big request ongoing to providers would be just keep doing some of the things you've been doing to change and try and make the process as simple as possible given the circumstances we're in. So the obvious one is virtual screenings, and that's evolved a little bit recently as well. I mean, well done, first of all, for getting virtual screenings done. And secondly, now blood tests can be done virtually as well, in terms of samples are taken and sent back in. There's also blood pressure tests as well. So things like HbA1c readings for diabetics can now be done via virtual and use of post and courier and so on as well. And I believe something like 20% of screenings have been conducted like that. That's really helpful. And I think, you know, if we can carry forwards with that, why do we always need to send a nurse out when we maybe can do it like that in the right circumstances? So I think more engagement from people like ourselves with our clients using this type of platform, and also maybe providers with people like ourselves. Some of the seminars that have been put on by providers over the last few months have been absolutely incredible and really valuable. And what it's meant is we haven't had to travel so far, go into London quite frequently, and 2 or 3 hours commute and time and standing on tubes and so on. You know, that's been avoided. And it's not to say that we wouldn't welcome being able to do some of that again, but to be able to provide seminars and webinars like this going forwards, I think has been a real revelation and something that I hope is carried forwards.
I think that's a really good point, David. And even from an event like ProtectX3 today, normally we would be restricted by the number of people we could put into a conference room, either at the Landmark or wherever it would be, and that means there's a limited number of people from each company that can attend, and the logistics of travel, as you've said, you can't have 50 people jumping on a plane and flying down to London or wherever it might be, but virtual does give us the opportunity to include more people in events like this, and that inclusivity has got to be a really positive thing that we can keep hold of going forward. So Emma, how would you react to Vicky's question?
Well, first of all, that whole inclusivity thing is definitely for me, because not all of us are lucky enough to live in and around London. And also, not all of us have jobs that enable us to travel and go attend events. So, you know, I think there's going to be loads of people listening to us right now who are in roles that wouldn't normally be able to get to events. So I think that's brilliant. I think some of it, though, is just stuff that we've been banging on about for years when it comes to technology. It's like there's still so much over-reliance on paper. You know, let's move away from that. Let's pick up the phone and speak to each other. Yes, let's use video technology to speak to clients as well, far more than we ever did. Emails, signature-free documentation, the whole trust issue, all of that. You know, I think we just need to get not back to basics, but, you know, as I said, so many of us have been talking about this for such a long time, and my new job is going to be back in the distribution space. So it's going to be even more important to me again, that we make sure that the process for buying insurance and the process, most importantly, for claiming on insurance is as easy as it can be. I mean, I'm a critical illness claimant, so I've seen things now from both sides of the fence, as somebody who's been recommending protection for all these years, and also somebody that's actually been able to benefit from it. And, you know, fortunately, I had a good experience, but I do know that some of the claims processes are far too clunky, and they're really not helpful for people in real genuine need. So that needs to change. And I think we also need to be really mindful that, you know, as Sarah was really making clear in her talk, that, you know, COVID has given a really good, you know, call to action for consumers and advisors to be talking about the need for protection. Lots of people have bought protection off the back of it. But we've also really got to be mindful that when the fear of COVID kind of fades away, there could be lots of consumers out there that just think, do I need that insurance anymore? And they could be looking to cancel it. So insurers and intermediaries have got a real duty of care to make sure that we are reminding the policyholders of the value of the insurance that they've taken out. And it's not just because of COVID and all the other things that actually goes alongside, like the virtual GP services and the second medical opinion, and obviously the, you know, particularly the things like counselling to help with people's mental health. So I think that's a real risk, particularly as we know there's going to be lots of people experiencing financial difficulties going forward. So again, using technology to make sure that we are communicating really well with our existing policyholders so that they're not going to be walking away is really important, I think.
Great stuff, Emma. Now, We've actually had a question that's come in over Twitter. So thanks to Martin. It's a Martin Blueprint is the Twitter handle. Now, I'm just going to give David and Emma time to think about this question, because I think it would be a little bit unfair for me to spring it on them now and expect an answer. So I'm going to tell you what it is, and then maybe we can come back to it towards the end of the session. But one of the themes, as I said, that came out today was Anna's strapline: forget the stats, tell a story. And Martin has said, could one or both of the panel actually live up to that and tell us a protection story? So I'll just leave you to think about that. I'll just leave you to think about that, and we'll come back to it later on. But thanks, Martin. And if anybody else has got any questions, you can tweet it. Don't forget the hashtag ProtectX2021. So the next thing I wanted to have a look at, and Emma, you touched on it a little bit there, is this, again, referring back to some of the things that Sarah said. Obviously, COVID has put protection to the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and yes, we can use that as a conversation starter going forward. But then I'm thinking about some of the things that Simoney was saying about vulnerable people being targeted by scammers, which obviously we don't want to entertain at all. And over the years, one of the things that the industry has been criticized for a little bit has been the use of scary statistics. You know, you've got a 1 in 2 chance of getting cancer, or 100,000 people have a heart attack each year. And you could argue that sometimes we do need a bit of a jolt like that to make us sit up and think about these sort of things. And maybe COVID has been such a jolt. But how do we tread that fine line between using stuff like COVID, but not crossing the line into something a little bit dodgy? Emma, you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a really fine line between taking advantage of the situation, like Sarah was talking to, and using something so awful as COVID as a really good tool to talk to consumers about the benefits of protection. And then what Simoney was alluding to is a really fine line between them not taking advantage of people. So take advantage of the situation, but don't take advantage of people. And both Iain and Simoney talked about, you know, unregulated suspect lead generators. And that's certainly an area that I think all of us have got a responsibility to consider, you know, distributors when it comes to where they're getting their leads from, insurers when they're thinking about where they're getting their leads from, but also the distributors that they're working with. Because this is an awful situation. It absolutely has been. And I know firsthand, you know, for years I kept trying to get my friends and family to buy insurance, and it took me getting cancer for them to do it. So as Roger said, sometimes you really need that jolt, that really harsh reality to actually really understand the value of protection. And we can't get away from that. We've got to be really mindful about how consumers feel about those kind of messages. You know, some of you will remember the whole you know, fallout when it came to Aviva trying to do the right thing, but advertising during Downton Abbey a few years ago. But ultimately, we do need to make sure that those tough messages are getting out there. And perhaps we need to make sure that our conversations with advisors are tougher and then a little bit softer for consumers, because ultimately we need to make sure that both consumers and advisors across the market to really understand the benefits and the risks involved in what we do.
David, what would you say about that?
Well, I think that's a great point. And just to pick up on Emma's last point, I think that's exactly right. I think the message needs to be, should we say, firmer with advisors as opposed to consumers. I think that's exactly right. I think you've got to be pretty sensitive about the way we message to consumers. Although, quite frankly, people are much more aware of their own vulnerabilities given the last 12 months. So in our experience, if you ask customers how they feel and what they feel vulnerable about, they will probably be a lot more robust in their response than anything we'd ever say. So, and we've seen that played out in our conversion rates with our clients since COVID started. So I think in certain areas we've seen our conversion rates increase by 50%. So that's without us needing to push the message. But what I would say is the message going to advisors probably does need to be stronger. There are something like 30,000 regulated advisors in the UK who all have an opportunity on a daily basis to be talking to their customers about protection. But we all know that quite frequently protection, if we're lucky, is somewhere near the bottom of the agenda, and it may or may not get mentioned depending on the timeframes given. So this message, and it came across in 2 or 3 of the presentations earlier about write it or refer it, is exactly right. So number one is we must talk. We have an obligation to talk to our clients about protection. You know, none of us want that on our shoulders if something's to go wrong and we haven't had that conversation. You know, imagine the guilt would be awful, and it's their families that ultimately that affects. So have the conversation. But if you're not comfortable with the actual practical applying for protection and you find it tiresome and quite frankly a bit of a pain, which a lot of people do, and we do it for a living, so we know what it's like. What I would say is create a relationship with a specialist. There are loads of really good firms out there. Go create a relationship and create a commercial relationship if you need to, and it's based on trust and great service, and your clients will get the advice they need by referring it to them, and they'll do it for you. And it's worked really well for us as a business, and I can only encourage other firms to, if you're not already doing it, go do it. It'll make a huge difference, and most importantly, more people get protected.
David, I'd like to just build upon that point a little bit, if I may. In Anna's talk, she referred to referrals quite strongly. And Setal Mehta, who's a previous speaker from ProtectX, actually tweeted a reply to something that Anna was saying. And he said, protection, write it or refer it. And I really quite like, you know, you can tell that I'm a marketing guy. I just love the sort of the one-liners that people come up with. But then I was also thinking about what Iain Sawyer was saying about, you know, more regulation, please, as long as it's good regulation. David, do you ever envisage a point where it almost becomes compulsory to write it or refer it? And, you know, you might have to evidence to the compliance team that you have got a relationship with another firm that you can refer protection cases if you don't want to do it yourself.
Well, that would be a big step, wouldn't it? And maybe that would be the end of rogue lead distributors as well, because if write or refer it did become compulsory, quite frankly, firms wouldn't need to be out there buying leads. There'll be enough conversation, creating enough referrals to keep everyone very busy. Whether that ever becomes compulsory, I don't know. But what I do know is there are various networks, including the firm that we're part of now, have taken the brave step to say, do you know what, we're going to tackle this head on, and we're going to put our money where our mouths are, and we're going to take this seriously. We're going to encourage people who don't, for whatever reason it might be, don't write protection, and there are thousands and thousands of people who fall into that category, and we create a situation where they can refer it in confidence and in knowing that, because it's a big leap of faith, we get that, and the trust to pass over referrals is a massive thing, but with a good firm who I know are going to do a great job for us. And for me, that's the first step. Whether that becomes a regulatory obligation is another matter. I think that might come down to the network and making their own decisions. But we found it massively successful. Of the 4,300 partners in St James's Place and advisors, 700 have used our service already, which is incredible, really, because we launched less than 2 years ago. So it really does work, and it really works successfully. And as I say, I can only encourage others to take that step.
Thanks, David. So when I asked the question about stories before, Emma, your hand went up. So I wonder whether you could tell us a short protection story and effectively give everybody who's watching an example of what Anna was talking about. Forget the stats and tell a story.
Well, absolutely, forget the stats. Well, as I mentioned earlier, you know, I'm a critical illness claimant, and it took me getting breast cancer to obviously become a claimant. But the story that I want to tell really is about the fact that, you know, the importance of reviewing your own cover as well as making sure that your clients do the same. I fortunately reviewed my cover after leaving Life Search and realizing that in my probation period, I wouldn't have the same level of protection. I reviewed it, and literally within 6 months, I was diagnosed with cancer. Don't put these things off. Don't think it's not going to happen to you. Don't think that, oh, it's going to take years and years and years before you ever need this insurance. It's so not true. So, yeah, so I'm, in statistic wise, I'm one of the 2 that has had cancer. But, you know, certainly when it comes to actually making sure that you get protection and you review your cover, because I hadn't done it for ages before that. I took over my PMI scheme as an individual as well, so I've been able to benefit from that. And essentially, so I've claimed on critical illness, income protection, and PMI. So yeah, by all means, ask me any more you want to about my story. That's absolutely fine. I'm really happy to talk about it in more detail. But yeah, I'm here, and there's probably a number of you watching this. I've got friends in the industry, Steve, Vicky, who have also told their stories, and it's just such an important one to tell. So please, if you're not selling enough protection at the moment, please do so, because it's so beneficial to have that money and not have to worry about cancer.
Do you know, I was thinking way back to a protection review conference, probably about 2 or 3 years ago now, where one of the things that came out was the phrase, be more human. And what is more human than telling stories like that? I think it's really, really powerful. So we've had another couple of questions.
Sorry, Roger, really, really quickly, just one other really important thing I just want to say, which I should have said, is that when I was told I had cancer and I was sitting in that room with the cushions and the sofas, the breast care nurse said to me, "Are you worried about money?" And she was asking me lots of questions about my finances, because she'd had lots of people sitting in that same position as me, worrying about how they're going to pay the bills once they got that diagnosis. I luckily didn't have that. That's a really, really powerful bit of my story.
Thanks, Emma. So we've had a couple of other questions that have come in through Twitter. The first one is from Prospectus Healthcare. Protect Us Insure is their Twitter handle. And this is a question: what is the panel's view of excessive loadings due to underwriters' interpretation of medical evidence, which on many occasions has been blown out of proportion? And that's from Wayne Jackson. Now, is that a valid criticism, do you think? And if so, what can we do about it? Or is that maybe a little bit of an excessive statement? David, any thoughts on that one?
I think it's pretty hard to answer that. I'm going to dodge that bullet, because I've already had a little dig earlier on at underwriting. What I would say is, every case is unique and every case is different. It's really hard to comment on that, because it depends on the circumstance of the client. There are clearly situations where people pose a much greater risk potentially than others, and each individual insurer is entitled to make their own underwriting decisions based on their perceived risk of that case. And us as intermediaries, as brokers and advisors, we vote with our feet. What we do is, when we get a case and we've gone through the fact find and particularly covered all the risks, then we pick up the phone and we phone around 8, 9, 10 different pre-underwriting helplines and talk through the case, and we'll pick the winner from that one, basically, in that process. And I'm sure we're not alone in that approach. It's really difficult to comment on excessive loadings. Insurers are businesses; they've got to make their own commercial decisions. And would I prefer a greater access to insurance for people who are finding it difficult to get insurance? Absolutely. And the type of work that particularly the Exeter were doing pre-COVID was very welcome in the market, and we're looking forward to seeing you back in that space again, seeing guys and others, because there is a huge demand for people who are more difficult to insure.
I'll stick with you, David, just for a moment, if I may. I had another question, and this is from Catherine from Cura, Catherine Knowles. Catherine just wants a little bit more on electronic health reports, David, and the positive experiences that you've had with them.
Okay, so happy to answer that one, and I'm sure Cura, like us, the vast majority of their cases end up requiring additional medical evidence. So whilst insurers often purport stats around 80% of cases are offered terms from the application there and then, our business and many others definitely don't see 80%, but that's the nature of the business we write, either because there's impaired medical health conditions that need further evidence, or because of larger sum assured that require additional evidence. So we're seeing probably 50% plus of our cases require medical reports. So last week, one of my colleagues' advisor was saying that she made an application to an insurer. It required a doctor's report. 1 week later, we had terms. 1 week. And the reason we had it in 1 week is because electronic doctor's report was requested. It pings out of the insurers into the doctor's surgery. No paper, no human involved except for pushing a couple of buttons to submit the information back to the insurer, and a decision within a week. Now imagine that client experience. So one of the things that's off-putting for clients and for intermediaries is the sheer length of time it takes to get decisions. So, it won't be uncommon that there are people like us who wait 3, 4, 5 months to get medical evidence back. Clients lose hope. If intermediaries lose hope, everyone, and the cost involved is massive. If we could get from the 20 to 30% of cases that get electronic reports now and get that up to and get a greater engagement from the medical fraternity, imagine the difference it would make if we can get reports back in 1 or 2 weeks. It would be a total game changer, and I encourage us all to maybe try and get behind some kind of campaign to support this more.
Thanks, David. Believe it or not, we're coming towards the end of our time together this morning. I always find that these panel sessions absolutely fly by. And just looking down at my second screen here, I can see that the conversation on Twitter is still really, really quite hot. So I've got a couple of quick final questions for Emma and David. The first one is about marketing. I recently wrote an article for Money Marketing around the fact that, and this is one of the things that's troubled me as a marketer for many years, is that during difficult periods like we're going through at the moment, the pandemic, and again thinking back to 2008 with the financial crash that we had there, it's a natural reaction of people to want to cut back budgets, and unfortunately marketing tends to be the budget that gets cut. And perhaps that's because marketing is often seen to be a cost by some companies as opposed to an investment. It could also be marketers like me just haven't explained it to the finance guys well enough why it should be an investment. And obviously my thought is that, well, if you're going through a difficult period where everybody else is cutting back, wouldn't it make sense to throw in a bit more cash and effectively do more marketing whilst everybody else is cutting back? So Emma and David, quickly, what would you like to see product providers and indeed your own distribution colleagues doing to up the ante on marketing during the current climate? Emma?
I think, some of it is what's been touched on before, telling stories. It's so important. We saw the power that the 7 Families stories had. British Friendly, when I was there, we produced claims videos. Other insurers have done the same. And I just think that is so, so powerful. And I think the fact that more and more advisors are using video to learn because of this environment is a perfect opportunity to, rather than just producing PDF sales aids, to actually do something and promote not just the consumer side of the story, but get your claims teams out there, get your underwriters out there to actually market what you're doing, to sell the product, to sell the experience, to talk about all the great work that they're doing to help people get insurance and to help people when they need it most when it comes to claims. So I think certainly, produce more material like this. It's more interactive through seminars, but also videos that people can watch in their own time. Because picture says 1,000 words, but having somebody also talking about their experience is just so powerful for me. So you're absolutely right, Roger. This is not the time to be quiet. We need to be talking and shouting and, shouting loud and proud about the good work that we can do for people.
And David, what do you think?
Not much to add to that. 100% agree. Succinct enough.
That's fine. Okay, so let's wrap things up, if we may. Iain talked about his 4 dreams for the future of protection. I just love that concept. I have a dream. He even misquoted that as well. Love it. So very quickly, each of you, I'll start with David. What would be your one dream for the future of protection market?
I'm going to be cheeky. I'm going to put a personal one in as well, make it 2. My first one is, like so many of us, is actually see my friends, family and colleagues again for real, in person. It would be amazing. So I can't wait. That one. I think it's about the customer experience for me in protection. It's, how do we make protection less complicated. And I agree with what Iain was saying about language and jargon. You know, we've been to so many conferences where this is talked about. I think there's been a great effort to improve that. But for me, it's what puts people off, what puts so many of those 30,000 advisors off talking about protection is the experience they have when applying for their clients and the bumps and the humps in the road. And so go back to EGPRs and initiatives like that to just make that journey easier for providers, for doctors, for people like us, and for insurers. Everyone wins out of taking weeks and weeks out of a process. So things like that are probably my number one dream at the moment.
And Emma?
I guess big picture dream would be for nobody to be in poverty as a result of falling ill or being bereaved with a loved one who's there to help support them. That's my big one. Whether that's because they've taken out protection or because there's an adequate state benefit system there to really, be a proper safety net. But in terms of protection, I guess it's just for advisors and consumers to properly understand the risks and make informed choices. I think that's the key thing for me. It's not just a good thing to say I'm not interested in protection. If they understand the risks, know what options are there, and then still decide not to buy it, you can't force people to do that. But at the very least, let's just make them properly aware of it so they can make that informed choice.
Fabulous. Well, that is it. ProtectX3 is a wrap. I'd just like to finish by thanking once again our 7 speakers and our 2 panel guests. Do please continue the conversation on Twitter, for the rest of the day, or at least for the rest of the morning. Use the hashtag ProtectX2021. I don't know whether we've trended on Twitter. We have the previous occasion, so no doubt Kevin and Joe will tell me as soon as the broadcast finishes. So do please continue to have the conversation. We love to interact with you on Twitter. And no doubt we'll see all of you, or some of you, next week at the Life Search Awards, one of the big events of the calendar, virtual of course. But if you haven't registered for the Life Search Awards yet, make sure you do. And we'll be back with ProtectX4 on the 17th of June. So if you've got an idea for a talk, if you want to be on the screen and say, we need to talk about ... get in touch, let us know what you want to talk about, and we'll have a conversation about getting you up here for ProtectX4. So that's enough from me. Thank you so much to everybody who's watched. Thank you so much to everybody who's tweeted and taken part in the conversation, and hope you have a great day ahead. Thank you so much for watching.